Welcome to the HR Insider, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of human resources, uncovering the latest insights, emerging trends, and the compelling stories of influential figures shaping the HR landscape. Today, we are joined by Mr. Suresh JV, the head of talent acquisition for India at Genesys. With over 2 decades of expertise, Suresh has led high performing teams dedicated to inclusive hiring practices and strategic talent acquisition. This is your host Harshal, and I'm thrilled to explore Suresh's visionary insights and perspective around the IT landscape in India. Welcome, Suresh, to the HR Insider podcast.
Hi, Harshal. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure, Suresh. Thanks for giving us some time and being part of this podcast. Really excited to hear your views and the trends on the ecosystem in India. Suresh, before I get into the nuances of the tech world, I would love you to share your professional journey with us in the HR space. Uh, you carry a 2 decades of experience. That's a massive wealth of experience. So maybe would love to know more about your professional journey.
Absolutely. I think I'm more like an outsider to HR when I started off because I started my journey in technology and then I moved in investment banking. About 15 years ago, I found my calling into HR and talent acquisition. So for me, HR was not something which was organic like a lot of people do. But after doing a lot of stuff in technology, I figured out that that's not my area. My passion lies in HR and talent acquisition. That's where I decided to take the conscious call of transitioning my career and pivoting into HR. So I've seen best of both worlds. I've been a techie myself. I've done investment banking operations and portfolios, and then I figured this is where I really find my calling. So that's where I shifted into HR, and I've not regretted a day since I moved into HR. I'm very happy with what I have. And I think my experience in tech really helps me when I work with my business and stakeholders today because I'm just not a HR guy like what normally we are. So I'm able to also bring in tech perspective because I've been in their seats before. So it really helps. That perspective really helps in getting my job done and being as effective as I can today.
Excellent, Suresh. And Suresh, tech has been the buzzword in India for like ages, right? Especially last 1.5 years, we have seen a slump in the hiring activities. A lot of commentary we have seen in the external ecosystem. A lot of people have been talking about their purview about what's the future holds for the tech industry in India. But if we go back in the time, I think the this industry has evolved and have gone through drastic changes over the last decade. So from your experience, from your perspective, can you describe how the Indian tech ecosystem has evolved over the last decade and what factor has been pivotal in shaping its current state?
In late 1990s, we were looked at as a cost center, right? So the primary objective for a lot of European or the Western companies to set up shop in India was to leverage on the talent pool and also leverage on the cost factor. Over the last 2 decades, we have seen there is a big upshift in terms of the mindset. What used to be a model where a lot of services companies used to provide services to global clients out of India, we have moved away from that model. So we are today much of a value-based market, as much as what US or any of the European countries are today. So a lot of folks that I talk to in my own fraternity, the CHROs, the head of global organizations, both from business and HR, today they don't open or expand their footprint in India because India provides them better costs arbitrage compared to any of the other sectors, either in Eastern Europe or somewhere in the other parts of Asia. But they set up or expand their centers in India because it provides them value. The quality of talent that comes in market is absolutely as good as what they find in any of their Western world. So today, we have gradually or we have dynamically shifted from being a very cost-centric country which was offering solutions or options to a lot of IT organizations. We have become much more a value-centric organization. So I think that's the biggest transformation, and I think that's kind of completely aided by how we have grown as a tech industry too, right? So if you look at 20 years ago, the biggest employers of India were your typical big four services companies, right? Be a Wipro, TCS, HCL. These were the folks who were the biggest employer then. But today, if you look at India from a tech landscape perspective, almost 50-60% of our hirings or our tech folks are working in GCs and product organizations. I think that's a big shift that has come in the industry over the last 5-10 years. So I think this is where the real transformation is happening because today India is not being looked at as a place where we can get delivery out of, but we are also being looked at as a country where the innovation happens. A lot of folks who build their centers in India are not coming to India just for the cost or the talent availability, but to leverage on the innovation that gets built out of India. I think that's the biggest transformation that has happened in the tech industry over the last decade or two.
Got it. One interesting thing you brought up in your conversation, that the movement from being a part of the IT services ecosystem to the product base and the GCCs organization, right? I think we haven't heard a lot about GCCs maybe at 10 years back, what we are as much as we are hearing about them today. And also, if I look at from a future perspective, we continue to see and talk about how many organizations are about to enter India. What's the GCC as a industry, as an ecosystem hold for India? What kind of employment opportunities GCCs can generate, and how lucrative the government policies has been to enable a success of GCC ecosystem, right? What do you think beyond the cost benefits, talent abundance? Why organizations across the globe are really eyeing India? Do you see any other reason also why GCC ecosystem is growing, and why this shift is really happening? Why people are no longer attracted or are willingly looking to work for an IT services organization, right? Why people now want to venture towards a product company? Why they want to work towards the GCC ecosystem? Why? What's the secret sauce, or what's the core reason why this shift has happened?
Absolutely. Other than the talent abundance and the cost factor, Harshal, one of the key important factors that really enables India's growth in IT is the infrastructure availability. Right? So if you look at our infrastructure today in terms of supporting technology ventures, is much more robust than what it was 10 years ago. Right? Let's take an example of the digital India. Right? Payment, the UPI. So when UPI came in, nobody thought UPI would be such a success. But if you look at every nook and corner of the country, even the roadside kiranas or the street side vendors today are using UPI. So one important factor is the adoption of technology that has happened in India. And then over the last 10 years, every government, be it in central or different states, they have really put in a lot of effort in creating infrastructure for technology companies. So in my role, also being part of some industry bodies like NASCOM, etc., when we go meet some of the key decision makers from the governmental organizations, the commitment that they bring on the table in terms of creating infrastructure for the organizations to grow or the ecosystem to flourish is something which really supports the growth, right? Because today we can have great talent, we can be the best cost center possible, but if there is not the right incentive provided on the ground for the infrastructure to be built, for these ecosystems to be made, then we will never be successful. But it's a kind of a perfect storm where you find a good talent pool that's available at the right cost margins for the organization set up. At the same time, there is a long-term commitment that's coming from different governmental organizations across the country to support and compete within, right? When we talk about competition, we talk about healthy competition between different states. Today, each state is trying to outdo the other by providing a better incentive, creating a higher infrastructure for the organizations to grow. So I think it's a combination of multiple factors. While a lot of people talk about the talent availability and the cost of the talent available, the other unseen or hidden factor is the how we have grown as a country over the last 15, 10, 20 years in terms of building the right ecosystem for the technology companies to flourish. And the question of why people don't find these services organizations attractive anymore is because of the aspirational change of our generation today, Harshal. Because if you look at the way we have transitioned, we talk about our father generations, right? So they were coming from a very stable economy. When I say stable economy,
Right.
it was a low risk, low reward environment, right? They used to go to office at 9 in the morning, come back six. They used to have a stable job. In many places, our fathers and our elders at home would have joined a company and would have retired from the same company. So they came from that kind of environment, and the transition into IT happened. A lot of us who started the IT industry or started a journey in IT industry 20, 25 years ago wanted to have some level of stability in our jobs, right? Which IT services provided that kind of time. So it was a very stable job. You knew what was coming day in, day out. There was a deja vu sense that we were quite comfortable with. But with the world changing, and more importantly, why people today prefer product is because of the visibility that Indians are getting in a global forum, right? Earlier, Indians were known, or India was known for its service organization, right? The development that used to happen from India through the services organization. But if you look at top tech companies today. You name any tech company, it could be a Google, it could be a Microsoft, it could be a Nado, it could be a Visa, MasterCard, any of these large companies, most of these tech companies have an Indian as a CEO. So basically, today we are not just being looked at as a great employer, but we're also being looked at as an employee with vision. So that's something that's happening, and that percolated. And the other very important factor is a lot of reverse migration that has happened in the last 10, 15 years. Right? A lot of us who have gone abroad, who have gone to US and other Western world, worked in large organizations and large entrepreneurial ecosystems, have come back to India and they've started setting up their own product organizations and GCCs here, right? So it's actually a combination of multiple factors. One, we as a generation have become much more aspirational today, and we are not comfortable with the status quo of big stable. We want something really exciting, and we are willing to take that risk as a generation today. Gen Z is kind of explaining that. Second is basically how today Indians across the world are being looked at not just as great techies, but also looked at people with the entrepreneurial spirit. And third is the reverse migration of a lot of our tech folks coming to India and building ecosystems. Today, I'm part of a lot of the SaaS ecosystem that is being built in Chennai and other locations, where you see the unicorn founders are not just happy being a unicorn company themselves. They kind of help the other entrepreneurs in the industry to incubate and grow. So there is a lot of collaboration that happens between the successful entrepreneurs who have set up tech companies in India, who then try to kind of create an ecosystem of the companies very similar to theirs. So there is a lot of activity that's happening there. I think these are multiple factors which put together has actually made us much more entrepreneurial today, and we are much more less risk averse today, and we are willing to take more risk today. So I think these are some of the factors which has kind of drifted our traditional foray from IT services driven mindset to a very product focused ecosystem.
Very, very interesting. I think the aspirational part, the emergence of Zenzi, the reverse migration, the booming of the ecosystem, which is more towards having a win-win culture, ensuring that everyone in the ecosystem is winning and is able to create a value in a larger scheme of things. I think very relevant, and we see this happening around us today. You know, at the same time, when we talk about reverse migration, when we talk about the abundance of talent, last 1.5 years has been kind of a dull when we talk about the IT hiring in India ecosystem. There has been a lot of layoffs which we have seen across startups, mid-sized companies, even large enterprises globally, right? We have also seen kind of a resistance towards expanding the workforce on the ground. Uh, but now with the new fiscal year starting, based on your experience, what is the hiring forecast for the tech industry in India for this year and also for the next year? What do you think would be the hiring be like? Would the hiring activities in the tech sector pick up? And how do you see organizations being ready to meet this change in the talent demand?
Absolutely, I think it's been a very mixed bag here, Harshal, because you
Yeah.
see at one side of the talent ecosystem where companies still struggling to find the right talent, while you have the other side, you have a lot of layoffs. I think last year was basically an anomaly in terms of a course correction. I don't think it was basically a trigger of the previous scenarios. It's not like a recession that has kind of completely made these roles redundant. I think it was basically a correction point for a lot of organizations which went about hiring mindlessly for multiple quarters together, suddenly realizing that they're overhired and they're very overstaffed. So the layoffs that we've seen across the organizations and industry last year was basically a correction where they put key emphasis in terms of efficiency building than just having headcounts. In terms of this year, from a talent perspective, it's going to be a mixed bag here, Harshal, because this is a soft recession that a lot of people have not seen coming, right? So in the past, if you look at the recession cycles, recessions are very clear. People know that
Right.
the markets are in recession because the indicators for the recession are very loud for everybody to see. But this last 1.5 years, 2 years, you get a sense that you're in a recession, but you don't really find those indicators in the market for recession because the tech stocks are growing. At the
True.
same time, the market is saturating, layoffs are happening. I think it's basically a combination of multiple factors because if you see the last 1.5 years, the entire slowdown started with companies realizing that they overstaffed. They started laying off people. They started bringing efficiency. But when that happened, there were a lot of other geopolitical, scenarios that got into the picture, right? And when that happened, then countries and companies became very cautious to hire. Today, while we are looking at doing a recovery, there are three critical phases that are being spoken about. One, the existing geopolitical tensions in different regions of the world. Second, India being a very strong market for IT. I think the local geopolitical situation in terms of elections is being also looked into. Similarly, in the end of the year, you also have elections coming in US. So I think it's like a period where we have multiple milestones that need to be checked by the companies before they make investment. So when I talk to folks in my own organization, when we talk to our industry folks, everybody is waiting for to see what is there in the next compartment before they actually board the train. So letting those
Right.
compartments go. So one was basically geopolitical situation that's happening globally today, then the elections in India plus the possible elections in US. A lot of these factors are actually creating a long drawn investment hold up compared to what it was before. And also today, people can't really put their finger and say we are in recession. There is still a conflicting thought that we are in recession, we are in soft recession, we are not recession. I think these are some factors which is creating a lot of ambiguity in the market, and that is creating a lot of issues. But having said that, one of the important, interesting facts that we were able to figure out last year was a lot of companies which struggled to hire when big companies were hiring were able to hire last year because if you look at the hiring challenges and the cycles, the quarters before the soft recession started, a lot of companies were very understaffed because they wanted the right talent to come in, but those right talent
Yes.
was picked up by a larger organization which had a bigger branding, right? So those organizations which were understaffed during the boom period of what we say the great resignation period, they were understaffed last year when the entire layoff started. So then they were able to hire folks because they didn't have bigger companies to compete with. So last year was a mixed bag where you saw one end of the spectrum where a lot of companies were letting go people. At the other end of the spectrum, companies which historically struggled to hire talent were able to hire great talent at a very reasonable cost. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a very interesting scenario where you see plenty at one side at the same time you have dot on the other side.
Yeah. You talked about a very interesting element of workforce optimization. There was overhiring during the great resignation phase, and organizations overhired the people. And last year, we saw a kind of an optimization in terms of the workplaces. Now, this also led to a very crucial trend, which was unlike previously, companies were not hiring in bulk for vanilla skills. We see a kind of a change towards the hiring activities from an organization perspective. They want to hire towards very strategic skills which are emerging in nature, which are niche, which are futuristic, which could be disruptive, which can give organization an edge in terms of their digital transformation initiatives. Now, basis this, what are the key emerging roles in the Indian tech sector that businesses should focus upon, and what skills they are looking for in candidates?
Absolutely. Some of the important skills that are being very highly sought out in the industry today is AI, machine learning, because if you look at the ecosystem, be it services, products, or GCCs, AI and ML is playing a very critical role. So that's a talent that has been still very heavily sought out. And though we talk about AI ML, one of the important skills that are very much in demand is the full stack development today. Because today great products can't be built without great developers, right? So still organizations
Right.
looking at talent in the full stack space where good full stack programmer has a great demand in market. Then some of the other skills where there is a lot of demand that's coming is basically designers because historically, if you see India as a development center, the designs used to happen somewhere else in the HQs and the development used to go. There was a very interesting study done by one of the consulting organizations which classified the India's GCC maturity model into four. They called Outpost, Satellite, Portfolio Hub, and Transformation Hub. So Outpost is basically where companies chose and set up centers in India only to perform QA and maintenance work. Then came the satellite model, which was basically companies were set up or GCCs were set up to develop modules independently. Then came the portfolio hub, where the entire development of a particular product was developed here. And then came the transformational phase of transformation hub, where not just the products were developed, the business ideas were created and ownership was taken in India. So today you are seeing a lot of organizations which started as an outpost 10, 15 years in their GCC life frame in India have moved into transformation phase today. A lot of organizations today are not just developing their products here, but having business stakeholders sit out of India and also do the design out of India. So today, design is an area where there is a lot of emphasis that's being built in the market. A lot of organizations are looking at design, which is UI, UX. That's a skill that is very much in demand. And the other skill that is not often seen in the market in abundance, but the growth is happening is the product management. A lot of product management today is happening out of India. So that's an area there is a lot of growth. Then you see your IoT, because today manufacturing and a lot of other industries which were not very big in terms of adopting technology. If you look at technology adoption, always banking, financial services were the forefront of the innovation, right? Then came the retail, e-commerce. Today, a lot of manufacturing industries are leveraging technology. So IoT is another area where there's a lot of growth that's happening. If I have to quickly summarize, I'll say these are some of the primary skills. One is AI, ML, full stack. Then you have your product design and product management, and then your IoT. And also a very important aspect is the cyber security, because today a lot of countries across, not just specific to Europe or US, but all the companies are very, very critical about the privacy laws, right? There is a lot of emphasis and awareness about privacy laws. So, cyber security is also another area which is being highly sought out in India, where the talent demand is high, whereas the talent supply is. So these are some areas which will continue to grow in India, not just for this year, but over the next 5 and 10, 15 years.
Interesting. When you are talking about these emerging skills and the organizations across the sectors are looking for people, be it from product management, software developers, people in the AI, ML, and even the IoT space, emergence of semiconductors. So I know semiconductor is also coming up big time in India with the global initiatives coming up. What is your assessment towards the talent readiness? Do you feel we have abundance of talent who are ready and have the skill levels required by organization within these emerging skills you spoke about, or we find the shortage? There is demand, but the supply of the qualified skilled talent is still very limited. So in your perspective, what's your take on that?
Absolutely. I think, that's a very interesting question, Harshal, and a very important question to also look at. Though we as a country, manufacture a lot of engineers and graduates year on year, our talent employability is very low compared to other world, right? So today, some of the studies that have gone through, plus the interactions that we have with the different stakeholders, be it from the ecosystem of education or business stakeholders or organizations, only 10-15% of our talent that emerges out of colleges are employable. So there is a still skill gap, huge skill gap that's available today. Because to an organization, it's very important for them to onboard the right set of people. Right today, every organization is looking at not services, GCCs, or products. Every organization is focusing on efficiency and return per employee. Right? So they don't have the liberty of having a wrong hire in any of the parts of the organization. So today, skill gap is a big problem where a lot of graduates come out of the education ecosystem, but they don't have the skills that are required to find the right job in the industry. While the problem is on the other side also, where we as organizations and businesses want to hire people, but we don't have people with enough talent. And always hiring for lateral talent from the market is not feasible, right? Because it doesn't help the organizations from a growth perspective. So there's a lot of emphasis that happens in terms of campus, but today the graduate percentage that comes out, only a small portion of that is employable by the organizations. That's one of the biggest challenges, but there is a light in the end of the tunnel, because today a lot of governmental organizations across the country have realized that there is a huge skill gap between what the industry needs to what is getting delivered from the college or the education ecosystem. There is a lot of synergy that is being built between the industry and the education ecosystem. So we are part of some of these initiatives where we work very closely with different governmental bodies, plus different NGOs and other ecosystem providers to train these students at while they're in college, provide them with the life skills, provide them with the skills that are needed for them to perform a role when they graduate and get into a corporate life. So I think a lot of these bridges are being built between the industry and the education system today to make this talent more readily employable. At the same time, we as organizations and industry also benefit, because Today we have higher level of talent that we can onboard, and it reduces our cycle time of learning and growth for these new hires. So the challenge is there. I think this is something that has to be looked at not at a micro level but at a macro level. Education ecosystem providers have to really need to review the content that they train and teach their students to see how relevant they are to the industry. At the same time, there has to be a lot of reach out that needs to happen between the industry and the education ecosystem to identify what is that the industry really needs from a skill and get those skills and trainings given to these students while they are in college.
So I think what I pick up from this is the initiatives towards upskilling, reskilling has to be ongoing. Today, people needs to invest in the skilling initiatives to stay relevant and be able to participate in the emerging job roles, which are the, I would say, the organizations looking for to hire for. Along with that, I think from a talent perspective, startups used to be one of the ecosystem which was very attractive to, I would say, majority of the tech folks because of they had an ability to pay premium salaries compared to your traditional IT services organizations, even for that matter your product companies and the GCCs. I think startups were always having that pull factor by leveraging the premium and the lucrative compensation by creating a very, I would say, perks around the from an employee value proposition perspective. But last 1.5 years we saw maximum layoffs happening from the startups. People today are very cautious while joining a startup. They're evaluating them extensively before considering whether they should really take up a job offer from a startup ecosystem. At the same time, from the growth of Indian economy, right, startups play a very critical role. We have around 31,000 plus startups in India, and the way the entrepreneurial ecosystem or the vibe is emerging in India, especially with the multi-generational workforce coming into play with Gen Zs. I think startup still is a very important core from a job employment perspective. What's your take? How do you see startup as a ecosystem emerging from a preference of a job seeker? Do you believe that as we move forward with the workforce optimization behind us, the startups would again appeal to the job seekers and they would be open to explore the opportunities with them?
Absolutely. I think startups are going through a phase of its own, Harshal. I think, I can probably give you a very life example. Right? Startups are going through the teenage years right now because the layoff for the pre 1.5 years, like look at startups. Startups had access to capital. They had extensive access to capital. A lot of investment which was made in startups, and some of the key KPIs that startups had at that point of time was the growth. They were not really concerned about the profitability, or the investors were not really concerned about the profitability. The biggest agenda or the biggest KPI or KRI these startups carried was to see how they can grow their user base, but that really shifted in the last 1.5 years because a lot of investors today are looking at startups to become more operationally efficient. So it is no longer a scenario where investors are giving out monies to startups so they can go burn cash. Cash consumption, cash burning, and then operational efficiency is something that is taken as a key result areas for a lot of these startups. So a lot of these startups are also trying to kind of move away from the old generational world of startups where they had excess money and they had a lot of money and they didn't have to deliver profits. But that shift is happening today. When that shift is happening, that's where you see a lot of layoffs that is resulting because a lot of startups which have they laid off people to bring in operational efficiency. Yeah, that's going to be a problem for next 1 or 2 years because it is about people's mindset, right? When they see startups laying off people, they will be a little wary of joining startups over the next couple of quarters. But one interesting factor about startups as an industry today in India is the last 1.5 years, we have actually started seeing the positive focus being put on startups which are actually profitably running businesses. Earlier, it was about what is your valuation in the market, how much funding that you had raised as a startup was the key primary discussion points in industry, right? But in the last 5 or 6 months, you see a lot of focus being put on how startups are becoming profitable. Even if it's a small startup, they are able to show a profitability curve. Those startups are being spoken well. So I think this shift will happen from a startup where going forward, even right from day one as a startup, if I start a company today, I will not be just looking at a mindless growth. I'll be looking at how I can create a model which is sustainable in terms of profitability while I look at a growth. And over the
Right.
next, again, the other factor, I think we kind of reverted to our original DNA of India for the last couple of quarters, because when you see a lot of layoffs happening, the first thing that comes to our mind is, stability, right? So a lot of focus of our employable workforce was, I know startups have high degree of work culture, the amount of work that I do, innovation that happens is higher. But now I'll take a pause and I'll look at stability. That's something that our workforce started shifting, and that's the reason a lot of companies which struggled to hire during the Great Resignation period were able to hire because they were able to showcase their stability more. But I think this is only a passing phase, because once the startups kind of figure out the right model of operations and they become more efficient, you will have a lot of interest in startups coming in. I think startups as an ecosystem is not going to go away from India, because earlier we used to develop products for India, right? Today we are developing products
Yes.
for the larger world. So that's something that will continue to happen in India. And it's basically a cycle where startups are not being the most preferred employer of choice, but that will soon change when the market sentiments pick up a bit.
Interesting. You spoke about the shift in the candidate's preference from looking at a high monetary or high compensation job to a stable job. The idea is to have more kind of a job security, have more stability and a surety of having a regular employment, and that's one of the reasons or the key reasons why the people are staying away from the startup ecosystem, and the trend might continue for a couple of more quarters. And within this startup, with the emergence of the startup ecosystem, there's another vertical which emerged in last 2 years, which was towards the your regular non-tech organizations, non-tech industries, the organizations in the consumer retail, your consumer durables, pharmaceutical, healthcare sector, wherein a lot of investment went in creating a full-fledged tech department, expanding their in-house tech capabilities. From your experience, do you see from a tech talent perspective the non-tech industries or the organizations are lucrative, as maybe as lucrative as a product or a GCC would be from a job seeker perspective? Do you feel that a non-tech organization is still appealing to the tech talent in India, and they are looking to build and grow their careers in these respective industries as well?
Yeah, absolutely, Harshal. I will support that thought, because today a lot of these non-tech companies are waking up to the power of technology, right? So great tech team of a non-tech will give them faster access to market, bring products faster to the market. So a lot of these non-techs are now seriously making that investment into technology. I think in the Indian industry, the one good thing that I've noticed as a workforce, we're not very picky about which domain that we work in, right? So a lot of our techies, and the best part is a lot of hiring that happens in India today is not very domain specific. Techies get hired for the tech skills that they carry. So there's a lot of skills that can be, transitioned from what they are into from a domain perspective to these non-tech industries. I think non-tech is an area that will continue to grow, because when I look at some of the statistics and white papers in the last couple of quarters, the highest percentage of GCC expansion and GCC setup in India is happening for the non-tech companies. It could be for the companies which are coming from the manufacturing space, the consumer durables, your chemicals. Those are the industries setting up their GCCs in India, because they see there is a huge potential that they have, that they have not really leveraged in the last a decade or two. So that's an area that will continue to grow over the next 10, 15 years. I think this is a good problem to have as an industry, because today our techies have options to choose between a lot of the different segments. It could be GCCs, it could be products, or it could be the non-tech industry too. But one of the key differentiator that as the years go, our techies look at is the sustainability of the business models. I think that's something that all of us will be much more focused when we are trying to explore another job or accept another offer, because that's a sense of realization that has come into a lot of our youngsters today, that when they look at opportunities, it's just not about the paycheck or the perks that are being given. What is the sustainability of the business for them to have a job and have a a challenging job for a long period of time. I think that's something that our techies are looking at, and non-tech setting up the tech ecosystems in India is a very lucrative space for them.
You know, we touched upon the how India is becoming attractive at a global level. Organizations are looking to come to India, set up their captive units by having their presence in India. India has abundance of talent pool, skilled talent who can work across emerging technologies. We spoke about the emergence of the startup ecosystem, and also the how the non-tech industries are shaping the tech talent and how they are leveraging the tech pool available in India. At the same time, we also analyze towards the shifting trends from an IT services to a product company to a GCC ecosystem from a talent preference perspective. My very final question, a topic which I would love to hear your perspective is, what advice would you give to young professionals who are aspiring to enter the Indian tech industry, and what should they focus upon to build a successful career? Because this industry is very dynamic. The technologies keep on changing, evolving. Organization needs keep on changing at a rapid pace. So you are one of those individual who can really give some great insights to the people, to the fresh graduates, to the aspiring professionals, young professionals. So what would be those golden nuggets for the listeners?
I think your question partially answers the question again, Harshal, because you use a word called dynamic, right? Today, the speed of change in technology is much faster than what it used to be 10, 15 years ago, right? Uh, my biggest advice to a lot of the youngsters today is, how adaptable are you in terms of learning? Because what is the most happening technology today, maybe in a couple of years' time, it becomes the redundant technology, right? How are you really investing? How are you able to understand the changing ebbs and flows of the technology ecosystem and continue to learn? I think it's one of the biggest lies in our society that we say, hey, you get into a good college, you finish your graduation, then you don't have to learn. I think that's the biggest lie with which what we start our careers with, right? Because uh, learning doesn't stop once you finish or once we finish our graduation, right? The real learning starts post that, because today there are a lot of competition in the market for the right jobs, and there are people who are willing to put more yards than what I do in terms of learning, commitment, and everything to get that job. Right? So it's important for the youngsters to really invest and continue to learn. And this is something that comes as an opportunity for them. Right? When we started our careers 20 years ago, the amount of access to different knowledge materials that they have today was never existed. So there is a lot of talent there in the market. At the same time, there is a lot of knowledge that they can kind of dip into to continue learning. Learning is one area that they have to probably be really good at, continuously invest in terms of learning, understand what's happening in the market, pick up new skills every day if possible. And the second most important point is, they have to be very perseverant today, because uh, somehow I get a sense that, especially with our culture of parents being very protective today to the kids, they don't have ecosystem to fail at home. So we kind of secure them so much, and suddenly they get into a world which is uber competitive. When they see failure or when they see setbacks for the first time, they find it very difficult to accept it and move on. So I think being very perseverant is important, because if we don't have a skill to be perseverant and then look forward, even areas where we had setbacks, it will be very difficult for them to grow and succeed. I'm just talking from my experience, because the opportunities that we have in those days were very limited versus the
Right.
opportunities that comes today. However, those opportunities comes at a cost, because the amount of people competing for those opportunities are much higher than what it used to be 10, 15 years ago. The two critical skills youngsters have to always continuously invest is learn, continuously learn. Second, be very perseverant in terms of setbacks, and don't feel defeated or dejected, but just see how they can continue to grow and refine their approach towards a problem statement.
I think this has been a very impactful conversation, Suresh. We explored the evolution and the current dynamics of Indian tech ecosystem, from pivotal factors driving its growth to the emerging roles and skills. I want to really thank you, Suresh, for sharing your perspectives, insights with our listeners today. Very impactful, and I'm sure our audience would get a couple of good golden nuggets to work upon, absorb, and implement as they move forward in shaping their careers in this dynamic ecosystem. So thank you so much, Suresh, for being part of the podcast today.
Absolutely, Harshal. As a closing statement, it's not all gloomy for Indian IT sector because a lot of studies today are reporting that post layoffs, once the market picks up, 40 to 50% of the roles which are globally laid off will be hired in India. So it may be a problem for some of the other countries, but not for India. For next 15, 20 years, you will see a lot of growth happening in India, especially in the IT industry. So, be it youngster or any lateral professional who is part of the IT industry, if they are investing their energy and effort in terms of picking the right skills, there is a huge demand for them and a great future ahead of them. So hopefully next time when we talk, we will have more positive things to talk about. Because today we are talking a lot on speculation, but I'm very positive that the market is growing, and in a couple of quarters we will be able to see a lot of positive trajectory in terms of the hiring in the India as the IT sector.
The future is very optimistic, and I'm absolutely in sync with your thoughts that a lot of opportunities gonna emerge as we move forward, as the Indian economic grows and flourishes, and I'm sure the tech sector is gonna lead from the forefront.
Absolutely looking forward to that.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey through the complexities and opportunities of the Indian tech landscape. This is Harshal, your host, signing off from the HR Insider. Stay curious, stay inspired. Until next time, goodbye.